Hi, welcome to Silent Generation. I'm Joseph.
I'm Nathan.
So, this is the first episode of a three-part series focused on some interconnected topics about American culture, kind of at the turn of the 1800s and the 1900s. It's all about outdoorsmanship, self improvement, and modernism and the reaction to industrial revolutions. So, today's episode is all about the scouting movement, something we know about through the Boy Scouts or the Scout Association in England. And then later in other episodes, we'll talk about summer camp and the Chautauqua movement in America. But yeah, this is our first kind of multi-step episode thing we've done. Hopefully don't bore the death out of people. But yeah, so we'll start with the origins of the scouting movement.
Yeah, so scouting can be traced back to Robert Baden-Powell. So Robert Baden-Powell was the founder and first chief scout of the scouting movement. He was a British Army officer who had scouted the natal province of South Africa during colonial Britain's campaign against the Zulu. And he was a scout in the literal militaristic sense, but he was also an intelligence officer, having traveled abroad disguised as a butterfly collector in order to conduct espionage.
Yeah, I think the butterfly collector thing was in Malta, which I said in our spies episode that Malta is just very spy coded to me, and I think it's just from some random Alex Rider book that I read as a kid. We say the word scout so many times in this that you forget that it actually does have a military position. I don't know how much it's used anymore, at least in the U.S. military. Growing up in an Air Force family, we don't have that position or anything.
Yeah.
It's definitely not a title or a rank at all.
Well, now
But
scouting can be conducted by drones. They can
oh
just take
yeah,
aerial photographs.
yeah, the role
But
of a scout.
previously, it would be people who'd have to be on the field. They
Hmm.
might draw maps in a notebook. They might, eavesdrop in different locations, that kind
Yeah.
of thing.
It really, if you think about military positions, it's the only one that could have become a youth movement, you know? Because there's also I guess it could have been sappers as well, or military engineers, they're the ones who actually build temporary bridges and fortifications and stuff. But that's not a very, I don't know, kids can't just go off and build bunkers and that be their activity. It makes a lot more sense for them to be practicing woodcraft or bushcraft, as it's often called, building stuff out of sticks and surviving in a forest.
Yeah, I mean, you imagine different speculative futures than I did in the docket because
Hmm.
I also, upon doing research for this week, I realized that scouting, because it's ubiquitous, I couldn't see this. It is very militaristic. It looks like its own aesthetic because it
Hmm.
has been ingrained in American culture for 100 years, but it borrows so much from the military.
Yeah.
And I looked at this and I learned about how, in the 1890s and early 1910s, and early 1900s, all of these little boys found Robert Baden-Powell's work and they started
Hmm.
to get really excited about scouts. And then he, along with other adults, recognized their interest and then created the scouting movement. But it could have
Hmm.
been anything else, really. It could have been cowboys. It could have been
Yeah.
knights.
Hmm.
It could have been spies. It could have been any other sort of macho cultural figure that boys get excited
Hmm.
about. It didn't have to be scouts.
Yeah, I think that especially as we'll get into the kind of value basis of scouting, I think some of those things you named could have used that. I mean, you talk about knights, that
Yeah.
example. There are organizations like the Knights of Columbus. So in other ways, more around adults, people have taken those symbols and turned it into something. But Baden Powell is just always going to come up in this. He's such a central figure. It's interesting to have something that's so grassroots and yet also owes so much to one single person as well, because he touches every kind of corner of this in some way, and through his family and his wife.
Yeah.
He was just kind of the right person at the right time. It seems he was chosen by the people, but then he took the mantle very excitedly.
Yeah, there were all the children that organically got excited about him, but then all of the founders of all the other scouting movements, they all had met him personally and been
Hmm.
inspired. Another one was Agnes Baden-Powell, his sister,
Hmm.
the founder of the Girl Scouts, the founder of the Boy Scouts. They'd all met him and knew him
Hmm.
and were inspired directly by him.
Yeah, and his wife Olive Baden Powell. I also see why in a lot of writings about Baden Powell they abbreviate him to BP, because you end up saying his name so much, you want to make it more efficient. But I'm gonna say Baden Powell every time. It's fast enough. It's four
Yeah.
syllables.
I don't know.
Um,
It's important to drop Robert here and there because we will talk about his wife and
oh
his
yeah, that's
sister a
true.
bit
Yeah,
too.
that's true.
But yeah.
Um,
But yeah, I was really fascinated by this youth element of how all of this came together because, in our contemporary world, it's really not common for children to have any agency or
mhm.
for anything to be child led. And There's this really good think piece I brought up once or twice on the podcast already. It's called The Zoomer Question, and it's by Isaac Wilkes.